The rain in Spain, it seems, falls predominantly on the new Mini. Now, this car is more than just a slightly damp piece of fresh metal. It marks a new beginning for Mini as a brand, along with the new Countryman and the new Aceman, the little electric SUV. For starters, let's talk about the name, because while Mini has been steadfastly calling this car the Hatch, everybody else has gone around calling it the Mini Cooper, because that's just what we do. So instead of using Cooper as a trim level, Mini is now calling this the Mini Cooper. It's available in a choice of electric and petrol versions. This one's called the Cooper SE. It's the most powerful of those electric models. But there's more to it even than that. You've got this fresh design with a nice sort of clean look. Now, Mini say everything on here is designed to be functional. Not quite sure whether this counts, this sort of grille effect, but never mind. You've got the round headlights, which are, of course, a Mini trademark. You've got this kind of clamshell roof design, which in this car's in white, but you can choose how you want it to be personalised. And you've got this sort of short three-door shape. Not many people are doing three doors now, but Mini's sticking with it. And then, if you come further around the back, you've got this whole new design with these British flag tail lights, which may or may not go down particularly well in certain markets, and this wide stripe across here. Now, I can't say I'm particularly sold on the new rear end, but if it works, it works. As well as changing the outside of the car, Mini has also made huge changes inside, where we've got this much fresher and more minimalist interior. We've got this clean dashboard that's trimmed in this rather nice fabric, actually, and we've got these little row of buttons which got these cool little toggle features. I particularly like the start stop button, which is like a little lollipop turnkey thing. Really works quite well. We've also got a sporty new steering wheel. Now, Mini says it's a 3-spoke one, but as one of the spokes is a piece of fabric, I'm not entirely sold on that, but never mind. The point is, it's really nice in your hands. It's quite thick, it's quite a chunky thing, but it does make it feel a bit more sort of sporty and engaging. But the pièce de résistance of all of this is this massive round touchscreen. Now, Mini's very proud of the fact it's managed to make a touchscreen circular, although it isn't completely circular, but never mind. This is the big story here. It isn't perfect, but it does use BMW's latest technology, and it's pretty good. It's sharp, the display is beautifully crisp, and you've got a choice of personalization options. You can even put your own picture on there, not necessarily of you, but of whatever you want, a bit like a smartphone wallpaper or something. The problem with it being circular is that there's no sort of corners to hide anything in. You can't sort of go, oh, we'll put the media button up here and we'll put the home button up here. Everything has to be kind of round the edge, which makes finding things a little bit difficult if you're not used to it. But once you've got the hang of it, it's a really sharp system, and it's got loads of functions if you want to use them. It's not perfect, as we said. There are problems with the climate control, which is hidden in there and requires a sort of prod at it, and then you've got to, it's a faff. Much easier if you just had a button that you can sort of twist, but that's way too old school for these people. The other problem with it is it's the only screen you get as standard, so it also has to be your speedometer, your battery readout, your power, your trip computer. All of that is in there. So we would recommend, if you can, going for the head-up display as well. Again, it looks a bit old school because it's on one of those pop-up glass screen things, but it does make it much easier when you're driving along to just glance down and look how fast you're going, which will probably keep you out of trouble with the police. Now, as well as focusing on technology, Mini has tried to make the interior of this car a nice place to be as well. The quality in here is very good, and if you want it, there's this panoramic glass roof, which I would suggest going for because, well, to be honest, it's a grey day, but even with it, it's still quite dark in here. We need this enormous light over here to make everything look evenly lit. When you've got it closed, it really does feel quite claustrophobic. And it's even more claustrophobic if you sit in the back, which I can't. there really isn't much space back there. Legroom is really very tight, and you wouldn't want to spend very long back there if you don't have to. But kids would be all right. You've got isofix mounting points for child seats and things, and it's not too bad. There probably will be a 5-door version of this. We're expecting one of those, and that will sort that out a bit, but it's not here yet. The new Mini comes with a choice of powertrains. You can either have one of the 2 electric versions, like the one I've got here, or you can have one of a handful of petrol options. Now, to be honest, electric suits the car quite nicely, but some people, either not ready to move over to electric just yet, will probably prefer to stick with the petrol power they know and love, and that's fine. You've got the option, and Mini's engineered the cars to drive exactly the same way, whether they are petrol or electric. At least that's what they say they've done. We haven't had a chance to drive a petrol version yet, so we can't pass judgment on that completely. What we do know, though, is that the electric version comes with a choice of 2 different levels. You can have the basic E, which comes with a 40.7 kilowatt hour battery and a 184 horsepower electric motor driving the front wheels. Or you can go for the SE that I've got here, and that's got a bit more power. It's got 218 horsepower, and it's got a bigger battery at 54.2 kilowatt hours. Now, that means you get a bit more range, but to be honest, neither the E or the SE is outstanding on that front. Officially, this SE version does 402 kilometers on a single charge, which is kind of adequate, or the E does 305 kilometers. Now, both are, in fairness, better than the old version of the electric Mini, which was pretty poor, but it's still not incredible. But this is a car designed for urban environments. It's not really the car you're going to use on long distances, especially as those figures are the dreaded WLTP official figures, and official figures don't tend to be that accurate, really. Get one of these on a motorway and you won't do anything like 400 kilometers. I mean, this one's saying I've got about 90% of a charge and 235 kilometers of range. Admittedly, I have spent the last day or 2 driving this like I stole it, but it's still not going to be spectacular. Nevertheless, that'll be enough for most people just commuting into work or going to the shops, things like that. And because you get some pretty rapid charging speeds, the Cooper E does 75 kilowatts and the SE does 95 kilowatts, you can charge it up fairly quickly, especially as it's quite a small battery. And if you have 3-phase electricity supplies, either at your place of work or at home, you can charge it up on a domestic socket at 11 kilowatts, and that's pretty good too. Now, Mini likes to make a big song and dance about how its cars feel like go-karts, and that's obviously a horrible motoring journalism cliche, which we would never use if it weren't for the fact that Mini had kind of already used it as a marketing tool. But the fact of the matter is their cars do tend to drive quite nicely, and the Coopers have always been very good. And this one is yet another shining example of that. It's really good fun in the corners. There's quite good body control, which means it doesn't roll or lean or pitch too much when you throw it into a bend, and the steering's quite precise, even though it does feel a little bit overly assisted, particularly if you're not in go-kart mode. But other than that, we can't complain. It does wash out into understeer if you start pushing it really hard, but it's a hatchback. What do you expect? And a front-wheel drive one at that. If it was drifting around corners like nobody's business, there'd be a lot of big insurance claims. The slight trade-off for all that body control is that the ride is a little bit on the firm side. Now, Mini say that's kind of intentional, and we're inclined to believe them because they want that sportier feeling. But we're on a relatively smooth Spanish road, and I don't know whether you can see this, but it is finding lumps and bumps that, well, there's a Dacia Jogger in front of me that seems perfectly level, and this isn't. Nevertheless, it is tolerable, it's not too harsh, and it doesn't have that wallowiness that some softly sprung cars get, where you go over a bump and you're still feeling it for the next 36 hours. So Mini has given this car a selection of experiences. They're basically driving modes operated by a little toggle switch down here next to the start button. And some of them seem to just basically be a new skin for the touchscreen, but some of them seem to have a bit more of an impact. Take, for example, the go-kart mode, which is sort of Mini's equivalent of a sport mode. That gives you slightly heavier steering, and it gives you a slightly different synthesized engine note played through the speakers when you accelerate. There's also a timeless mode, and that's designed to evoke memories of the original Minis from the late 1950s, early 1960s. So you get this much more classical font, you get this kind of cream background, and the synthesized engine note also gets a bit of a tweak. Now, Mini say what they've done is record an original 1960s Mini and taken the character of that sound, although not that sound. They've taken the kind of vibrations and stuff and fed it into the note you get when you accelerate in this new Mini. The result is weird, frankly. It's a very strange sort of setting, and you get this kind of rattle that you wouldn't normally get from a electric car. It's odd. I don't know if you can hear it now. I've just engaged it. And at lower speeds, we're doing, 40 kph, you get this growl. And then it becomes a bit more modern as you accelerate. Maybe because the original Mini couldn't accelerate particularly well. But hey ho, Mini have put it in, and some people will like it, some people won't. I think you can probably guess which camp I fall into. Now, whichever experience mode you choose, you're going to end up with some sounds that aren't entirely synthesized. You kind of expect electric cars to be quiet and refined, and this one is when you're doing urban speeds as we are now. But when you accelerate, you start to get a little bit of tyre roar kicking in and a bit of wind noise. And once you're up to motorway speeds, you do actually have to start raising your voice to talk to you a little bit. It's quite a bit of tyre roar. And again, we're on smooth roads here. When we get this car in Ireland, it might be a surprisingly loud thing. What you will get though from both versions of the electric Mini Cooper is pretty good performance. I mean, even the basic E's got 184 horsepower, and that's more than enough in what is still quite a small car. I mean, admittedly, we're all a bit tired of the whole Minis aren't Minis anymore thing, but they're still small cars, and 184 horsepower is more than enough. In this one with 218 horsepower, it's enough to get the wheels spinning when it's damp and greasy like this, and you still get torque steer in the dry. It's hot hatch quick. Obviously I like that because I'm a child. And when you combine that with the way it goes around corners, it's great fun. Special mention should also go to the brakes actually. They're pretty good. There's always that sort of thing when you're driving an electric car and the brakes have to manage sort of traditional hydraulic braking and the regen you get from the electric motor. Now, some cars really struggle with this. There are some real problems with it. Others don't, and you get what is, surprisingly, a fairly consistent feel. This falls into that category, although sometimes it requires a little bit more of a push on the left-hand pedal than you were expecting. And, you know, it's not a problem, but it does take a little bit of getting used to. You sort of feed in a little bit of braking and go, oh no, I'm going to need more than that. Yeah, no, definitely more than that. Yeah. And that erodes a little bit of confidence at first, but once you're used to it, no problem at all. It's really good. And it makes this thing so much fun to chuck around. Yesterday when it was dry, I had an awesome day on a mountain road. And yeah, I did have a small issue with basically emptying the battery from 90 odd % when I left to sort of 15 when I came back. And I hadn't gone that far. I'd only been driving about 2 hours. But let's say I hadn't been entirely driving with economy in mind. Now, this thing does have a eco mode, which I shall engage now. Green, it's called, and you get a little picture of a hummingbird, which, you know, is cool. It flaps its wings as well, which is a bit distracting. Anyway, that kind of gives you this eco readout and tells you whether you're being efficient, whether you've gained any range by the way you're driving, or anything like that. It even comes with a little bonus range. And it turns economy driving into a kind of game. I mean, I'm not sure it's a game I want to play all the time, but there is that sort of, oh look, I've gained an extra kilometre there. It also seems to dull the throttle response a little bit, and it doesn't do anything for the car's sporty credentials. But most of the time, you won't be driving like your hair's on fire. You'll be driving to the shops, or to pick the kids up from school, or to go to work. Sporty stuff won't matter. But if you do put your foot down in green mode, you get a nice picture of like a big cat running along. It's like a panther or something. And it goes all pink, which I guess is fun in its way. Let's have a look. Would we call it a panther? Maybe a lynx or something. Anyway, let's get rid of that. And let's go for go-kart. Just as the road gets narrow and twisty. Why do I have to two-stage authenticate? Just let me do go-kart. There we are. We get this noise, all the lights go red. Whee! And that's what happens if you put your foot down mid-corner. Especially when it is quite greasy. Does this strange overrun sound. It's, you know when people have obnoxious exhausts and you get that pop and crackle on the way down? It sort of does that. And I've got to say, I'm not sure I like it. Makes me feel like I'm in like one of those pod races from Star Wars, being shot at by those funny little creatures with the annoying laugh. It may well be a dull and miserable day here in northeastern Spain, but the Mini has brightened it immeasurably. Now, the old electric Mini was a bit of a damp squib, but this one is so much better, it's not true. Now, I'm not entirely sold on the design, but the interior's fabulous, it's well built, it drives brilliantly, it's got bigger battery than before, better range, and it's a really good, fun little thing. Now, you've got the choice. If you don't want an electric one, you can have a petrol one, it's fine. And to be honest, it is everything that the new Mini should be. We'll wait to see what new variants are like, we'll wait to see what the petrol engines are like. But as a start, this bodes really well.